Hello, everyone. I'm Stu, your co-host, and I'm here with the paranormalist, Patty Wilson. Patty, how are you this kind of meh Sunday?
Well, for a mid Sunday, I'm doing okay. I've got pretty much everything accomplished I needed to. So I'm in a pretty good mood. And I think I have some really cool stories.
Excellent. Yeah, Sunday, I mentioned last time that Sundays are the day for me to do yard work or whatnot else. And knowing that this weekend was going to be full of rain, yard work happened Friday evening, and I just hurried and did all of that. Today's one of those days that's great for doing the indoor projects that you have stacked
Yeah.
up. But enough about me. And for you, our listeners and viewers, we thank you for joining us. If you're new, we really appreciate you being here. If you are a return or repeat, thanks for coming back. And we'd appreciate you clicking the like or give us a good rating, whichever platform that you're on. In the description of this particular episode, there'll be everything paranormalist related from Facebook groups to email address. We'd love to hear your feedback, your ideas, and things like that. And with that, this is all unscripted, so I hope I got everything. Sometimes I miss a couple things, but yeah, if you keep coming back for the episode, you'll hear everything eventually. So, and with that, what is our topic for today?
Oh, strange monsters.
Oh, yes. Was this a Mike-inspired episode?
Well,
Yeah.
to a large extent, yes. And also, I was putzing around doing some stuff on the internet, came across a couple stories, and it brought me back to a story I wrote a long time ago called The Yellow What Is It? So I wanted to read the story to the viewers. I don't often read them anything much direct, maybe a quote. But I thought this story would kind of explain. This story's fascinated me for a lifetime. First of all, it's not that far away. It's in Berks County, PA, which is literally drivable from where I live. And I just wanted to share it, and then we'll go forward. So the first story, of course, is The Yellow What Is It? In the townships of Ruscombe Manor and Muhlenberg in eastern Berks County, there were agog in October of 1879 with strange tales. A mysterious beast had taken up residence in the area and was causing quite a stir. It all began early in the month when the son of the prison inspector came running into the town of Topton Station, raving about how he had seen a monster. He raced into the main hotel in town and told his tale to the hotel owner, Owen Hinnerschnitz. Hinnerschnitz believed the young man. Several local fellows, in fact, decided to go looking for the beast. They had already heard stories afoot that a strange creature had been spotted in the countryside outside of town. But now Schmiel, the prison inspector's son, insisted he had seen a yellow beast lying down near the gate to a local field only a little while earlier. Schmitz had been driving a herd of cattle into the field, and during this occupation he had seen the beast. He described it as yellow, mud-covered creature, about 4 feet tall. It had long arms with only 2 fingers on each arm. The fingers closely resembled talons or claws. The feet of the creature were very large, flattened lumps without toes. The beast was male and naked, with yellow skin that was covered in dirt and clay. It had furrows in its head, but the body was smooth. Along with Schmiel was another man named Jared Rissmiller, who had been helping him with the cattle drive. He corroborated Schmiel's tale and insisted that the beast had been startled by the cattle coming through the gate. It stood up and darted toward Schmiel with its claws snapping and its arms and forelegs open as if to grab him. Then it apparently changed its mind and turned and fled into a cornfield nearby. The men were understandably shaken and rattled by the beast. They secured the cattle and went in pursuit of it. They found it a second time laying in a ball near a fence on the other side of the field. When it realized it had been discovered again, it jumped up on 2 legs and blinked at them. Rissmiller described it. It is yellowish brown in color, with no hair, small eyes and face, arms about 14 inches long, legs somewhat longer, and hands and feet resembling those of a human being, and has 2 horns on top of its head. The 2 young men attempted to capture what it would locally become known as the What Is It? But the beast eluded them and made a getaway into the woods beyond the fence row. Later, the young men's story was supported by that of another local resident, Mr. Heckman. Heckman encountered the beast only days later. He confirmed the description given by the others, but he offered an explanation for the beast. He said it was an escaped gorilla. However, no one was reporting the loss of a gorilla, and the description didn't seem to tally. For the next several months, local folks reported the strange encounters and odd footprints. Several farmers found strange tracks in the plowed fields after rainstorms. Others reported hearing strange cries in the woods at night. Some felt that something was following them along the darkened roads. The disturbances got so bad that men armed themselves with their dogs set out on night patrols and looked for the beast. But the what is it was never captured. To this day, nobody knows what it was. And the question is, what is it? Like, we're all familiar with the Bigfoot, all these other things, but there are literally a plethora, lesser known creatures that are out there, and we don't know what they are. And this was one that I wrote about, and I just have always wondered, what was it? What was it? Does it have other ones like it? Does it mate? And I'm going to apologize if you hear a cat. Can you hear him?
I did that time.
Okay. Yeah, he's yodeling his head off, and I'm not really sure why. So he's sitting here yodeling at the ceiling. But I just found the stories fascinating that, there's things like this. And this isn't the only one. Like, I did an entire book called Monsters of Pennsylvania, for those who don't know. And there's a large component of it that's, Bigfoots and giant snakes and stuff like that. But there's others that are something completely different. Things like this that nobody has any clue what they are. And I wanted to share some odd stories of stuff like that tonight. And so that's really what I set out to do. So the next story is, it's an eyewitness account from a Reddit account. And it was a young woman who's talking about when she was 13 years old, she lived in the country. She had two other sisters, an 18 and a 15-year-old sister. And they would get on the ATV and go from their farm to their grandmother's farm, about 2 miles away. So there's a path kind of worn along through the edge of a field that, took you there without getting on the road. And that was the path they were supposed to take. But the corn was cut down. So they decided to veer off the established path and go further out on the other side and run that and just see how much fun that would be. Now, it's the other side of the cornfield, so it's not exactly like they're going into uncharted territory. But this is what happens. They're only, like I said, going across the field from a different angle. As they're going across, there's a little bit of a hillock ahead of them that you have to go up over and down the other side. So they're kind of angling towards that hillock. And that's when they see it. They see something standing on the hill. Now they slow the four-wheeler down because they're trying to figure out who it is. It definitely looked human to them. So they're thinking maybe it's their uncle or a farmhand, and maybe one of the cattle got stuck or lost and they're out looking for him. But it's just sort of sitting there on a big rock, watching them. As they get closer, they slow the vehicle down to almost a crawl because there's something not right about it. And then this thing moves, and it moves more spider-like than human, kind of going towards them. And they freak out, and one girl screams, "Stop, stop." And it's the oldest sister. She had been letting one of the other girls drive because it was such an easy journey, She quickly knocked the other girl off the front of the four-wheeler, jumped on and screamed, "Get back on." And as this thing is coming in their direction, they can see now that it's like a man, but tall and thin. Arms are way too long. The legs are long too. And it's naked, whatever it is, it's naked, completely naked. And it's grayish in color. Its head wasn't like a human's, though. It was thin and smaller than a human's, almost bizarrely small for the body. And she said she's trying to drive around it to get to grandma's house, because that's closer for her. She slows it down for just a second, and then as this thing hits within 40 yards of them, it's closing the gap rapidly. She hits the gas and off they go. Her sister's on the back screaming, drive, drive, drive. And she does. As soon as she gets to the other side, she passes this thing and she's afraid to even look to see if it's following her, because that would take time and maybe cause her to wreck. So she just keeps driving. And she gets to grandma's, and as soon as she gets there, she literally runs into the edge of the porch, because she was trying to get as close to the house as she could get so they could scatter up onto the porch and in through the door as quickly as they could. Well, she tells her grandma what's going on. Her grandma calls her parents, her uncles. Everybody gets kind of a powwow going. They think the girls are seeing a man. And so they're like, well, get your gun. We're going out there. You can be no naked guy out there in the middle of the woods trying to accost our kids, kind of a deal. And they head out. Nobody ever saw it. Nobody ever found it. But for her and her sisters, they were completely convinced from then till today that whatever it wasn't a man. It wasn't human at all. So what was it?
Cross between Slender Man and a crab.
And it's a creepy looking thing from the sound of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I just thought that was a really interesting story. The next one is not necessarily a monster exactly, but I'm not sure what happened. So this is a story about a young man. He's in his mid-30s. He lives in a kind of a quiet residential neighborhood, and he works at a restaurant only about 10-15 minutes walking distance from his house. So he doesn't really need a car to go to work, so he never takes the car. And he usually walks. He works, the evening shift, which is the main shift at the restaurant, as they're famous for doing like these really beautiful dinners. So he leaves at like 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and about midnight he's heading home, having shut down his part of the restaurant. So one night he's walking home, as he did every night, and he's like, he notices a man across the street walking along perpendicular to him. And he's maybe 1 block up, but the man glances back at him a couple times as if to see what he's up to. And he's like, I wonder why he's so spooked. I'm not doing anything threatening. I'm just kind of meandering on at my own speed. And the guy he's watching him now pretty close, because there's something odd about this fella. And it's particularly his, like he's nervous or anxious, or he doesn't want someone watching him. So as he's walking along, he passes telephone pole, light pole, whatever. And then just at the end of the block, he passes another one, but he doesn't come out the other side. And the guy stops and he kind of looks and he's like, nah, there's plenty of streetlights. I should have seen what was going on. So he walks up there and kind of looks down side roads, and he's like, there's nothing there. There's nobody around. So he kind of puts it off and he says, well, optical illusion. Must have been an optical illusion. That's what that was. Till about 6 months later, he's walking down the road, middle of the night, just like always, coming home from work, and he sees ahead of him on the same side of the street a woman standing on a step ladder, about 6-7 foot high step ladder, and she's got it on the sidewalk and she's looking up, but she's shielding her eyes like you would if you were looking at the sun, but there's nothing out there but a little bit of moon, and not a full moon even, just a little bit of a sliver of a moon. And he's watching her and he's thinking, now that doesn't make any sense. What is she doing? What is she looking at? And he said, as soon as she saw him, she quickly scurries down off the ladder. She picks it up and starts walking away in front of him, just in front of him, like maybe 5 or 6 steps by the time she gets the ladder folded up and has headed off. And she's booking it. She's moving very rapidly for somebody dragging a ladder. And he's watching her and he's like, just keep a little distance. Maybe she's crazy. We'll just like stay here. But she's headed in his direction. He really can't keep going any other direction. So he keeps walking slowly. And just as she hits that same corner, but on the other side of the street, she disappears completely. His estimate is that he was maybe 10 seconds behind her. And he's like, not only did she disappear, but the ladder disappeared. I have no clue what's going on. But on 2 separate occasions, I saw somebody disappear behind that light pole and not come out. And it's an interesting place. And he's like, he's walked past it multiple times and not found out what it was. So is it a portal of some sort that they're stepping into?
Your guess is as good as mine. You're probably better than mine because you've been doing this a lot longer.
So this next one is about a golem, which is a Jewish, it's kind of a monster that you can create out of dirt using the spirit of a recently dead person to create this thing, and it would do the bidding of the person who created the golem. And that's a very, very just rudimentary definition. There's a lot more to it. There's incantations and things that have to happen. But for the purpose of this, you just need to know what a golem is. So it's a being made out of dirt and animated through the use of Jewish folk magic. So there were 5 people asleep in the home near this gentleman's college campus. And when he got to the house where he stayed, you know, there are a lot of these houses where they just rent a bedroom and access to a kitchen and living room part-time. He was in one of those, and he got to there by about 3:30 in the morning. He said he wasn't drinking or anything. He was just kind of out hanging out with buddies and what have you. And he said, I couldn't sleep, so I decided to go smoke a cigar before he went to bed. So he's out on the front porch, just sitting there smoking, when he sees what he says something moving, rustling, and he figured it, whatever it was just a shadow, and it was making a noise in the bushes. He could just barely make out there was something in the bushes. And he's thinking it's a raccoon or fox or, you know, something like that. And then he said it stood up, and I could hear, as he put it, 2 legs shuffling through the leaves at a very fast pace. And it faded into the darkness, so I couldn't see what it was, but it sounded like a man walking. So now he's really got his antenna up, you know, he's really alert, because there shouldn't be anybody in the bushes right there on the far edge of the property where he's renting. And he said it finally steps into the sidewalk, and on the sidewalk there's streetlights, so he could see it better. And he describes it as, at first, a silhouette, and then I could tell it was maybe 4 foot tall, shorter than he was by far. And it was peeking at me, like it was curious, like it was watching. And I felt there was a maliciousness to it. And I had this terrible sense of dread, he says. So they stare at each other for what he estimates to be 3 or 4 minutes. And he knew he should run. He knew he needed to move, but he felt completely paralyzed. In fact, the word he would use is the word trance. I was in a trance and I couldn't move. I couldn't make myself. And then he said, as it began to move toward him, he could realize that it was too thin, almost like a malnourished person. The arms were spindly, the body, the chest, you know, very slight. And he said, but it was perfectly proportioned. It had to be a human. It had to be. At first, I thought maybe it was a child in a costume or something like that, but it wasn't. And he laid his cigarette down, and he said, all of a sudden, I knew I had to move. I had to run. I just took off running, and he slammed inside the house, locked the door behind me, and sat on the couch looking out the window. So then I saw it again. It came running across. It blocked the light from the bottom of the driveway as it went by. It was a man, but made completely of dirt. A man who had white eyes, and he was moving as though he were trying to get away from me, or maybe he was looking for me. I'm never going to really be sure. Or what was it, you know? So we've talked a little bit about pugwudgies on here. One time, I think we did a story about a pugwudgie. So I want to talk a little bit about them because they're a Native American lore from the Northeast in particular. And a pugwudgie the pugwudgies were actually made by a giant whose name is Mosthop. Now, this giant being created different other entities, and one of those was the pugwudgie. And the Wampanoag and Native Americans believed that this is what this being had created. And this particular Mosthop loved the people. He loved them, and he wanted to give them the pugwudgies to help them. And so he created these beings. And they started out being very nice, the pugwudgies. And they did nice things for people. They helped them any way they could. But every time they tried to offer aid, it always seemed to be destructive somehow. So they planted corn, and then the corn rotted in the garden. They helped you carry water, and there were holes in the vessel. There was destruction and chaos everywhere the pugwudgie went. Well, because of all of this, they became a well-meaning nuisance to the native people. They appreciated the offer, but who wants to have to mend your bucket or replant your corn or do whatever else? And after a while, the pugwudgies got really angry because they weren't able to fulfill their promise. Their promise and their purpose was to help the people. And some of them got angry. And when they got angry, they began to attack the humans. And then the humans began to kill them. So Mosthop was very angry because he had given these to his people to make them happy. And now he was angry because nothing had worked. He didn't understand. Why could the humans not just mend the pan or plant the corn again or whatever was needed? Because these little beings were given with the best of intentions. And surely the fact that they were trying so hard should count for something. Musquat got really angry and left the area, decided not to deal with the tribe anymore. And it was then that the pugwudgies turned and began to burn down the homes of the native people, and they kidnapped people from the tribe. And whenever Mosthop heard about this, he sent his sons back. And he said, well, I didn't want them to do that. I wanted them to just let the poor old pugwudgies alone. But the pugwudgies had turned evil, and they literally killed his sons. Some say that he came, Mosthop, and then he tried to save the people from his creation. But there's no proof of that, because you see, it was never seen again. To that end, the pugwudgies continued on, growing in number as time went on, whispering names into the wilderness, calling people away from their homes into vengeance. Now, these beings, as they got more evil, began to morph, and they were no longer these friendly-looking little beings. In fact, the pugwudgies developed in some very scary ways. They would laugh evilly. They would play terrible tricks on people. They had smooth gray skin, and they blended in with the shadows in the forest. Their spines were enlarged. Their fingers were large. Their ears and their noses were also very large. They walked in part, but they scampered and sometimes used their hands as well. You might have called them a leprechaun, except they were 3 foot tall, and they were much too big to just be ignored. Now, they don't always stay looking exactly as I just described them, for you see, they've over the generations developed some skills. Now, they can change. They shapeshift into huge walking porcupines or cougars or other animals that may attack you. And so it is said that a pugwudgie is a dangerous being full of tricks and evil. There's a story I know about a man who was walking his dog along the pine barrens. And on this particular night, it's very late, a little foggy, and he just needed to get the dog walked. You know how that goes. You have to do it anyway. So he's walking the dog, and they're walking along the edge of the woods at the foot of the road, and he hears, "Courage, courage, courage." The dog starts to ground back up. "Courage, courage, courage." The man was listening. He's like, "It almost sounds like words, but I don't know what it is." Again, he hears this little chirpy voice, "Courage, courage." And all of a sudden it dawns on him, it's not courage. Come get it. Come get it. Is what he was hearing. As though the beast was calling to him to come and get him. Or maybe it was the dog. Either way, he grabbed the dog and headed for the house, and that was the end of that. And after that, he decided he would no longer walk the dog at night because, well, he wasn't planning to come get it. I have always been fascinated with the Pugwudgies, I must confess. They have so much interesting lore. Now, I came across something called the Fresno night crawlers from California. And like they sound insane, but the stories continue to come out. So they started in about the 1990s. And they just seem to stick around Fresno, California.
Stick.
So, and people will get it in a second. So these things are some sort of a cryptid. They're tall and thin. They look, most of the ones I've seen look like 7-foot tall clothespins. You know, the carved ones with the
7 foot long, or 7 foot tall pair of pants. Yeah.
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 And they're seen. They've got video cameras from CCC cameras that have caught these night crawlers, and they're just a very odd creature. There are, you know, pictures of them. They look like, again, a log or a pair of pants or something. And they have the crotch, you know, like it's split as though there's a crotch, and then just a solid mass of a body. The interesting thing is, and about nobody was talking about him, because who wants to be the crazy person who says, I saw this 7-foot tall pair of pants walking down the road, you know? However, in about 2007, there was a homeowner in Fresno who set up security cameras in the garage. He had seen and heard something. He won't release his name, but he released the footage, and he said that he wanted to know what the dogs were barking at every night. So that's why he put it out. He was expecting mountain lions or something like that, but that's not what he got. He said to his absolute shock, the next day he called the police and said, I have footage of what appears to be strange. Now, these ones were smaller, only several feet tall. Creatures, in a pair of them. They were walking surreally across the screen. The family members had looked at them and they couldn't believe what they were seeing. None of them had seen anything like it ever. But you could see that as these beings got closer to the home, they caused the dogs to get really agitated. So the theories are, you know, that they are interdimensional, that they are maybe aliens from somewhere. But whatever they are, the stories are growing, not just in Fresno. Now they're being reported in other places as well. And it's fascinating because some of these sightings and some of the video is daylight video. So it's not like it's just, you know, this herky-jerky piece of video in the middle of the night that could be a grainy anything moving along. Like you can clearly see that it looks like a pair of pants or two legs, and the top of it's just this very narrow log. That's what it looks like to me anyhow, is a log. The people near Fresno began to talk about it, and the speculation is that their long legs are because they have to move through the boggy landscape of the swamps near the Fresno area. There is a legend that they are some sort of a peace bringer creature that has been seen in by the native populations in the past. But whatever they are, Well, I don't know if we'll know. However, I would like to point out that in March of 2011 in Yosemite National Park, officials put up cameras to try to catch trespassers. Instead, they got the same kind of unusual footage. They show the images of small, pale, armless creatures walking down one of the paths. They released the video footage before somebody with common sense told them not to. And suddenly, there they were. There have been other sightings at other parks and now in other states as well. So what are they? No one's ever met them. They don't seem to appear to people. Sometimes they'll appear to be wearing clothes, which I think is where the pants come from. And sometimes they just appear to be logs. But whatever they are, well, what is it? I don't know.
The videos I've seen of them, they look like, if you can imagine like this, they just kind of not even bending. They just kind of, move like that. It's a strange looking. In fact, the first one I saw had a taller one and a shorter one. Like the shorter one was a child, and like it stopped and waited for the child to catch up. It was really interesting. Now, whether it was real or fake or whatever, I have no idea. But with the numbers of them, you got to wonder.
You do. And here's the thing that makes this so interesting to me is there's so much video. I mean, like, there's multiple videos of them, and they just are bizarre. And they always come in twos. There's not a single video that's ever been captured that shows 3 or 1 or 10. It's always pair. They're not identical. Like you said, sometimes there's a larger one, a shorter one, or one's fatter around or whatever, but they always seem to come in pairs. I just thought that was a fascinating story. And, I have to tell you, I've seen it before, but at the beginning I was just like, oh, what's the point? It's obviously a hoax or something. But these have been going on for a good, 20, 30 years? And they're not getting less accounts. In fact, we're getting better video and eyewitness accounts of this. They've never threatened anybody. They definitely seem to be out there, whatever they are. So, what is it? So my next one is about a 4-legged man.
All right.
This takes place in New Mexico. A man shares the story. His son and 2 of his buddies are 17-year-old boys. They're driving along in a pickup truck. It's evening and getting dark when they are headed to one of the boys' homes. And suddenly, standing in the road in front of them is a man. And they expected him to kind of move off the middle of the road to the edge of the road as they started to, come down the straight stretch, but he doesn't. So they slow down. And they finally stop because he's not moving at all. And they can just see the silhouette of him. He's right outside where the headlights would hit. And they're afraid to get any closer. He seems to be wearing jeans and a shirt, but they can't make out his features. And nobody moves. The kids start to talk about, maybe we should just go around him. Maybe the guy needs some help. Maybe he's confused. And suddenly the guy drops to all 4 and begins running towards the truck. Kids start to scream, this is crazy. He's literally on all 4s like a dog running. But he doesn't look like a dog. There's not a dog-like thing about him. And they slam the truck into reverse and turn around real quick in the middle of the road and take off. And here's the thing, he keeps chasing the truck. Like, they can see him coming behind them in the rearview mirror. The guy who's driving is like watching it that way. The other 2 are working around like screaming, keep going, keep going, keep going. He's still coming. He's still coming. Or he's moving fast. He's moving fast enough that he's still keeping the truck in sight. So finally they get to a place where there's a lot of turns and they lose him. And they take a different route and end up going back to the one kid's house where they were trying to get to anyhow. And they get upstairs and they don't say anything to the parents, and they're not sure what to make of it. But the one boy calls his dad, and he says, "Dad, can you come and get me?" And he's like, "Well, why can't your friend drive?" And he's like, "I don't think we want to drive tonight, Dad." And on his way home, he tells his dad this crazy story. And he said, "You know what? I get 17-year-old boys. I get, carrying on. Maybe imagination takes the best of them. But to the best of my ability to tell, he wasn't high. He wasn't drunk. He was terrified. Whatever it is he saw literally terrified him." So he said, "I have to tell you, I take him at his word. And since then, I've approached the other two boys, and both of them have confirmed exactly the same story. I don't know what they saw that night, but I know they believe that they saw something. A man with 4 legs." It's creepy enough to think of a werewolf or a Bigfoot, because like some part of us kind of has accepted that that stuff might be real. But a dude on 4 legs running that looks like a human, a different kind of thing. And so these kids were frightened. I mean, I'm not telling you I wouldn't be frightened if I was driving down a road at night and that comes flying at me.
Makes me think of something like right out of John Carpenter's The Thing.
Oh, yeah,
Except
that's true.
it's not in the Antarctic. Yeah.
Yep. No, I have a granddaughter who can't watch that movie because the one from the set, was it the 70s,
Yeah,
the
the
80s?
80s. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, the remake isn't, in my personal opinion, is good. Sorry. Like there's
No,
some
the
things that
original, yeah, the original John Carpenter one. In fact, that when the guy saw the head sprouting the legs and walking toward him, what he said was what I would think if I was in that car with the kids. Something was chasing us.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah, there are some things that just shouldn't be fixed or messed with. That was one of the movies. Every so often I watch that. It's one of my very favorite
Mhm.
horror movies. So my next story is about a man who's sitting there, gets up in the morning, lives out in the country, and he's sitting on his porch smoking his pipe. It's just about dawn and having a cup of tea. This is his quiet time. There's pine trees all up and down the other side of the road from his house, and he enjoys that. He likes to sit there. Maybe the deer will come out, or some squirrels or rabbits will come out. It's like his quiet time. And then, he'll finish up, get ready for the day, go to work, but he had that half hour that he makes sure he takes every morning. We all should have that routine, some peace before the chaos of the day begins.
Is it calm before the storm?
Yep.
Yeah.
He's sitting there one morning and he's just sort of watching, waiting, hoping something, an animal will come running out of the woods, just because he enjoys watching them. But that's not what he sees. He sees what looks like a heavy-set woman with sagging breasts. She's dressed in some sort of loose garment, and she seems to have an odd lump on each of her shoulders, like hump. She's very small. She has no hair on her head. She has no discernible features, just this mass of flesh that he can't quite make out. And at first he thought, I must be seeing things. And he sets his tea down and he's looking again. And he's like, no, no, there's a floodlight down there. And it walks toward the bottom of his driveway. And he can hear it thumping on the highway. Definite footsteps. And then it's gone, just gone. Well, he writes that down to awkwardness and creepy. And he decides that, he must have imagined it. It must have been something else. So a few nights later, he decides before going to bed, he's going to smoke his pipe again and have a little glass of wine. No big deal. Goes out back, sits at the little patio table, and he's just being peaceful. When out of the woods from behind the house, she comes again. But this time, he could see her a little better. She moved like a dog. If it had been having an injury, it was struggling, limping. It was an animal movement, not a human movement. It wasn't the way a person walks. He said this time he could see the face a little bit. It didn't have a nose. Its head was too small for its body, which was large. She looked at him, and he knew they had made eye contact. She blinked, and she turned around, and she loped. That's the word he uses, loped into the pines. And he said as fast as he could, he jumped up and went after her. He needed to know. He said, I had a, he just had to go after her. He's chasing her as fast as he can. She's moving ahead of him. And despite the fact she looks elderly and obese, she's booking it. So he loses her into the pines. Goes in, locks the house up, goes to bed, and he's like, what the heck is wrong with me? And I saw this one. I know I saw this one. And he's doing that thing you do back and forth when you see something you know you shouldn't see. You know that feeling? Like, nah, it was a shadow. It was a this, that.
The 2020 rationalization. Yep.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So he's doing that just before dawn. He's just beginning to finally fall asleep because he had been up all night because he just couldn't quite shake it. And he's just beginning to fall asleep on the couch whenever the cat starts growling. And, you know, that mewling sound the cat will make whenever it's going to be attacked or it's going to fight. Mm-hmm. Sound, yeah. It's doing it really loud. And he looks up, and the cat's in the window, and it's spatting at the window like it's hitting at something. He flips the light on, and he sees the face of the woman. He's like, immediately I could see where the nose should have been, and it wasn't there, just a hole. And the lips were all swollen, like they had been bruised or something. But her eyes were brown, and they were human eyes. He said, I yelled, and while I'm yelling at her, she turned and ran. She headed back toward the pine trees, and he went running after her. Whatever this was, he wanted to catch it. As he's running after her, yelling, she picks up speed. The mass of her body doesn't seem to inhibit her ability to run. And he has a gun in his hand. He had pulled the gun out the night before. And he shoots two shots up into the air at the pine trees. He said, I had no idea, what was going on, but I didn't have any desire to hurt her. I just wanted to put a fear in her and let her know that I don't want to play around. I live alone. I have a cat and some guns, and that's all I wanted. Said after that, he didn't see the creature again. There are nights whenever he's sitting there, when he debates whether he should smoke that pipe or go on in, or mornings where he sits inside the house now and he watches the woods, not just for the possums or the raccoon or the fox, but for what else might be hiding in those pines watching him.
That's a weird one.
Yeah. And just for the record, please everybody bear with me, but my son Michael loves these stories but won't listen to them whenever he's by himself because he says that they're creepy to be listening to when you're driving or out in the woods, and he's in the woods a lot. So enjoy that, Michael. Let me know how that works for you, love. So those who don't know, my middle son Michael listens to and has chronicled every episode I've ever done, and he'll tell me when they're scary or they're not. This one was kind of scary. And I thought I would share that for that reason.
All kinds of thoughts come to my mind. Was that some failed genetic experiment, or was it something otherworldly? Just for the fact that something would lope, I mean, that indicates a slowness or a not kind of gimpy, but just unable to go, and then all of a sudden to be going that fast. Yeah, that's something that's playing with him, I think.
Yeah, there are just these kinds of creepy stories out there, and I'm fascinated with them. The what are they? What is it? And that's the yellow. What is it? I come back to that all the time. There's stories. I was reading a story not so long ago about an owl witch they started out in Mexico. They're very popular in Mexico. these stories, and they've made it into the United States, and as we've gotten called Lacutia. And as we have gotten more minorities and immigrants coming in, they're bringing their folk tales and their beings with them. And so Lacutia is she's a witch owl, and I've read multiple stories of Lacutia. So Lacutia is this is a story of that was told to this young woman by her mother, that in the 1960s, her mom lived in a neighborhood where a few houses down, there was a lady who was ill. Her husband took care of her because she couldn't get out of bed. She was bedridden. And people in the neighborhood began seeing what they called this giant owl, flying around in the evening hours, and it would appear on people's porches, look in their windows in the middle of the night, things like that. And one night, the owl landed and walked up onto the porch of this man whose wife was ill. And he had seen it multiple times, and he thought that it was because it was coming to carry her soul away, to take her, to steal her. So he gets angry because he's feeling harassed by this thing. Other people have seen it on his porch. He's seen it on his porch. And he opens the door. He has a gun in his hand, and he starts screaming curses at it. And he shoots. It falls backward for just a second, jumps up, and then takes off and flies, lifts up into the air and flies away. People hear the gunshot, so they start come running. They're like, what happened? What are you shooting at? And he's like, Lacusa. And he tells them what happened. And he says, look, there's blood on the porch. I shot it. I hit it. I know I hit it, but she got back up and she took off. Well, they're all, in awe of what had happened. Nobody had ever shot a Lacusa before. And he said, well, I got to go in the house. I got to check on my wife. He goes in, and a couple people follow him. And her bedroom window is now open, and he can't explain that. He knows he kept it shut because the night air is not good for her, make her sick, mess with her lungs, the doctor had said. But there it is, wide open. And she's not in the bed. In fact, she's nowhere to be seen. They find a woman outside with a bullet hole in her arm. And there are stories, There have been stories for a long time. One of his ex-girlfriends had been spreading a tale that he married a Lacusa who had bewitched him and stolen him away from her. And now those old tales were active again. And was it true? Was she a Lacusa? Was she a demonic entity, a witch? What was it? Well, the one thing they couldn't argue is, whatever she was, she definitely had a bullet in her arm.
Yeah.
And eventually, he and his wife moved back to Mexico because nobody would talk to her or deal with them, because you don't want to deal with a Lacusa. Not only could it bring you bad luck, but they could steal your soul. And I have found multiple stories of this, multiple people who have had it, have one of these things follow them home, flying over their car. If you can imagine, hitting the roof of their car, and when they get to the house, they're terrified, and they look, and that's what they see, a owl woman. And it reminds me very much of the Mothman stories in its own weird way. So there's a lot of what is it's out there. And I haven't even begun to scratch the surface of what is it. But if you have an idea on what it is, or you want to hear more about what it might be, let me know, because I literally have dozens and dozens of these stories and different kinds of beings, each and every one. Some very creepy, some not as much. Some are folklore, and some are eyewitness sightings. And with that, I will end my stories for tonight.
All right. Thank you for that. And I believe I'll say good night.
Good night.